This is Oklahoma Voice with Jonathan Clour on KTLV 1220. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Oklahoma Voice. I am Jonathan Clour. This evening we have our legal team back, Ashley Forrester and Collin Rockett. They are attorneys at law, and this evening they will be discussing how to choose the right criminal defense attorney if you ever face criminal charges. But before we get to our main talking point this evening, I'm wanting to do a post wrap-up of the Daniel Holtzclaw trial. Daniel Holtzclaw was a 28-year-old ex-Oklahoma City police officer that is accused of assaulting 13 black women between the ages of 38 and 54. This evening, Ashley and Collin are going to give us some commentary on this and to give us a post wrap-up of the trial. Collin, thank you so much for calling in this evening.
You're welcome, John.
Hey, I'm excellent. And Ashley is in the studio with me this evening. I want to thank her for coming on as well.
Thank you for having me.
Collin, now, I am looking at the jury selection, and it caught the attention of the Huffington Post, and on HuffingtonPost.com, there was an article that was written, and it said, flawed jury selection methods could favor ex-cop who allegedly raped black women. And I want to give the audience a summary of the jury selection, and the jury was all white. The majority of the jury was male, and the article also said that 3 black men were rejected as jurors. Is this going to have an effect, or perhaps should I say, did this have an effect on the outcome of the trial?
Well, normally, what we would like to believe is that no, it did not have an effect, because in a perfect world, it shouldn't. But here in the world in which we live, I believe it probably did. I mean, you've got an all-white jury, and you have victims that are all black, and then your defendant is white. And if race was going to play a factor in the trial, I believe that, or if it did play a factor in the jury's decision and the outcome of the trial, then it would be, the odds would have been stacked racially in his favor.
I see. And for, some of our audience, who has the final decision on who is serving in that jury?
Both the state and the defense have a say in that. Each side gets 6 challenges for really any reason that isn't racially or gender motivated.
Mm-hmm.
And then there are unlimited challenges for cause, and cause would be somebody that has proven through the voir dire process, but the questioning by the attorneys, that they can't be fair, that they can't be unbiased going in there and listen to the evidence and come to a conclusion based upon the evidence and applying the law.
I see.
Just to kind of cut in and add also to what Collin was talking about. Whenever we're talking about strikes, so the state gets a certain amount of strikes that they can use, and the defense does too. And so whenever you start the voir dire process, usually you have an attorney who's up there asking questions of the jury pool. For example, have you ever been a victim of sexual assault or sexual violence, this and that? And the attorneys are sitting at their table, and if you ever notice, they'll take little notes and write down on their piece of paper, like, the defense probably be like, oh, I don't want that person on my jury panel, because they're going to be extremely, sympathetic to these, potential victims up on the stand. And the state's like, oh, yeah, I do want those people on my panel, because they're going to be sympathetic to the victims up on the stand, and they're going to be like, I was sexually assaulted, and I understand, and get them, So it's really interesting criminal law and jury trials and that have a lot of I always like to joke it's kind of like a game of like chess or poker, this or that. There's so much strategy that goes into the entire process, and even at the stage of jury selection, which I think a lot of people don't realize how important jury selection is, and it can really determine, have so much influence on the outcome of your trial. There's so many different things in the system that can influence, the trial versus, your DAs and their performance, your defense attorney and their performance, the jury, the judge, the witnesses. But the jury is a very important spoke in that wheel, and it really does make a big difference.
Very much so. In fact, many attorneys believe that a case is won or lost during jury selection.
Yeah.
I see. Wow. So
That's
it comes down to the actual selection. Well, and sometimes, I've heard that, when the jury is selected, and if a person knows that they are going to be serving as a juror, they tell them do not watch the media in order to keep a fair view on the actual trial. Can you give us some information on that, Collin or Ashley?
Sure. The whole point of that is to keep we all know that a lot of news reports and such are not just factually, they don't just always present the facts as they are presented. We want, as a society, we want to hear that, we want news that's interesting, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it happens a lot in the media that it doesn't just present the facts; it presents facts and strews them in a way that are more interesting to the public. And we don't want that to be influential in the decision. We want jurors to hear the evidence as it is presented in the courtroom, not as it's presented by the media.
Mm-hmm.
And then we want them to make a decision. A great example of this is Daniel Holtzclaw was crucified by the media before he ever got to trial.
Right.
And that's why we don't want someone making their decision based on what is said in the media versus what is being presented in the courtroom.
Yeah, like Collin said, we hope that people will actually follow the rules and the jurors will follow the rules and only look and consider the evidence that is in the courtroom. And not only evidence in the courtroom, but evidence that was allowed to actually be admissible evidence in the courtroom. But at the end of the day, they're humans. We're all humans in this process, which can create flaws, which is really severe and important because it can, affect whether the state can take away the freedom or life of an individual, which is a pretty big impact.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead, Collin. Did you have something to say?
I was going to say, just to add to that, they're also told not to discuss the case amongst themselves or with loved ones, and specifically with loved ones until after it's over. And the jury's told not to discuss the case amongst themselves until all the evidence is presented. That way, they get all the evidence and then discuss to make an informed decision versus discussing the evidence only after the state's presented their case versus discussing the evidence after the state and the defense have had a chance to present their cases.
I see.
Just another, along that line of wanting the jury to be making a decision based on what's presented in the courtroom versus what is presented in the media by family, by friends, and by other jurors throughout the process.
I see. And, looking at Holtzclaw's charges, he received a slew of charges, and each one of those charges that he didn't get off of each had, like years or X amount of time that he would have to serve behind bars. And I believe it is the judge's discretion to choose whether he serves all of those charges consecutively or not. And I believe that means that all of these different charges that come together, some of those can be reduced, meaning he would be serving multiple charges at the same time, opposed to serving them one after the other after the other. And if he serves all of them one after the other, he won't be seeing the light of day. How did this case turn out? What did the judge decide in terms of whether he would be serving consecutive charges or not?
The judge has not yet decided that. After you have your trial here in Oklahoma, the jury recommends a sentence.
Okay.
The judge, it rarely happens, but the judge can choose not to follow that if he has a good reason. However, after your sentencing, as is the case right now with Daniel Holtzclaw, after your sentencing, you then go back before the judge for what's called formal sentencing. And that'll be where Mr. Adams and Mr. Holtzclaw ask the judge to run his sentence concurrently versus consecutively.
Mm-hmm.
So that hasn't happened yet. I'll tell you, I would be very surprised if it wasn't run consecutively.
Okay.
Because I believe consecutively he would serve something like 265 years versus concurrently would serve something like 30. And some of those crimes for which he was convicted are 85% crimes, meaning he'll serve day for day 85% of whatever sentence before he's eligible for consideration for parole or earned credits or anything like that.
I see. I didn't realize that. And go ahead.
Just to wrap that up, what I was saying is I would be surprised if it wasn't run consecutively, because I don't believe that the judge would give him an opportunity to serve X amount of years and then actually be readmitted into society.
I see.
There are a lot of factors that go into that, political, so on and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
I would kind of like to add on to that. That kind of mentions a point I was wanting to bring up, is that, this is a time, I don't want to say unfortunate for this guy. Like, I'm sure, I don't want to say he's not getting what he deserves, but it's at a time with societal unrest, with the issue of cops and crime of, that cops are committing crimes, this and that. So I feel like he's really going to be made an example of during this time of all the societal unrest going on. So, like Collin said, I wouldn't be surprised if the judge really stuck it to him.
Mm-hmm. And
if I'm not mistaken, Judge Henderson is a former law enforcement officer.
Wow. Didn't realize that.
I would think the fact that what happened in the charges and that he was found guilty of 18 of 36, I would think that Judge Henderson would take into consideration that he's really smeared the name of law enforcement by doing what he did.
Yeah.
And it's my understanding that Daniel Holtzclaw was preying on these women, and when he would come into contact with them, or if he pulled them over or something like that, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but he could see their past record perhaps, or he knew that they would have a bad reputation in terms of being charged with other things in the past, and it would make their voice not as reputable. And so they were somewhat powerless in the sense, because of their bad reputation, because of their criminal past. He's able to get away with these things. And I believe he had targeted one woman mistakenly, and that's how it all got started. And then all these other women came forward.
I believe that's correct. I also believe that right along, whenever you're pulled over by law enforcement, they can run your name through what's called NCIC. And that's what they're doing with your license when they go back to the car, is they're running your name through NCIC to see if you have outstanding warrants, if you're on probation. And my understanding is that many of these women were either on probation or had prior convictions, which you can also see through NCIC. And he did tend to target women that had a record. And also that kind of played out in the courtroom, because it's my understanding that he was acquitted on half the counts.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't say for sure, but my guess would be that some of the victims were actually, the jury didn't find them credible, be it their past, be it their present demeanor, who knows? But
yeah, and I believe on those lines, a lot of some of these women, they were charged with prostitution in the past. They were charged with drug possession as well. And I thought one of the ladies, she might have actually at that time when she was being asked questions, or if she was being brought into the courtroom, she actually had drugs in her system, I thought, or she admitted to having been exposed to drugs. Did you hear about that?
I did hear about that.
And so that would make her not credible, right?
Oh yeah, that would.
Okay.
That, in my opinion, that would have a huge impact on whether a jury would believe her testimony or would discount it as being uncredible.
I see.
I will add that one of my good friends, she and I often have discussions where we kind of tend to disagree on the aisle on different things. But she was talking about how she was unhappy that, the defense attorney goes in there and pokes and prods the victim, and she thinks it transfers into a problem in society where people aren't believing women if they're claiming, rape or this or that. And while I understand where she's coming from, I was like, okay, but look, from, my side of things, the defense attorney has a really important job to do. We have to make sure that the DA actually proves their case. We have to make them prove their case. That's our job. Because people do lie. And witnesses do lie. I'm not saying they were here. I'm not trying to specifically talk about this case. I'm just saying in general, as a defense attorney, it is our job to vet out that process. It's one of the tools, it's one of the few tools actually that we have to try to, in the courtroom, make sure that someone's actually telling the truth. So yeah, we might poke and prod a little bit, and we might bring up some things that we want to try to see if you're actually, a person that does tell the truth or not. Because I'll circle it back, like I said, at the end of the day, I do not take lightly the state and the government taking away someone's life and freedom. So that's a pretty big deal to me, especially because sometimes we get it wrong. So.
I wholeheartedly agree. It's the right to confront the witnesses that testify against you is one of the few tools that you have as a citizen to challenge what the state is claiming, and it's very important that you be allowed to confront and cross-examine anybody that comes before the court and claims that you did X, Y, or Z.
Mm-hmm. And Ashley, I believe last Friday when you were on, we were discussing law and charges that people were facing, and you were getting passionate about it, and you said that a lot of times folks are charged with a crime that they did not even commit, and even if there's not enough evidence. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, I can't remember specifically what I said last week when I was on, but I imagine it probably went something like this. Whenever I was in law school, I worked with an innocence clinic. And so I was exposed to a lot of cases where people were actually convicted of crimes that they didn't commit. And a lot of times it's later on they're found that they're exonerated. Sometimes maybe through DNA or something else comes about showing that. But there have been times where it's later on found that they're innocent, but it's too late. Like they've actually already been put to death by the state. Or say they've had 40 years taken away of their life. But how can you repay that? I mean, their children have grown up, they've missed out on so much. And there are a lot of things that can create in a case where there can be, false convictions. Eyewitness testimony a lot of times that can be kind of faulty, and people might think, a witness might actually think they remember something kind of correctly, but really it wasn't, because it's human perception. And, whether it's a 6'4" or, 6'2", or if it's, what color of hair it is or what color of shirt somebody had on and this and that. So it's going to kind of get jumbled. Even forensics really really grinds my gears because people in the jury, they think they hear forensic testimony from the examiner that, oh, these fingerprints are, they shouldn't say match, but say they say match, or they say that the DNA, shows that this is the person, which they don't just say that either. But point is, it's actually at the end of the day a person who's usually doing this forensic examination, like their actual lab reports and this and that. And it's very subjective because the person has to make the call if they think these two prints match. The person makes the call if they think that these peaks on these different 16 loci when they're testing their DNA actually match up. Like, it's a person doing it. And going back to, humans have flaws and we don't get it right. I can't think of necessarily a better system, but I'm really uncomfortable with the death penalty and people being able to take away 40 years of someone's life or their life completely by the chair based on this kind of evidence. It really bothers me.
How much does the judge's role play into that, or perhaps feeding into the fact of putting someone, charging someone with something that they didn't have anything to do? Does the judge have a big role in that, or is it more along the lines of what you were mentioning earlier?
Collin, I don't know how he'll feel on this. I personally think the judge has probably a smaller role. Really, most of this stuff gets hashed out between the state, the DA and the defense attorney and the jury and the witnesses. And the judge is kind of more just he's a little bit of a gatekeeper in some sense, but really it's, what does the jury believe?
Okay.
I believe, I agree with what Ashley said. I would tend to say that the judge has a little more of a role in that because the judge upholds the standards by which evidence is admissible.
True.
So if you have some questionable evidence that doesn't meet the standard of peer review, that doesn't meet the standards of admissibility, the judge then is the gatekeeper, like Ashley said, to whether that evidence goes before the jury. But a lot of that comes down to the defense attorney challenging that evidence. And unfortunately, there are a lot of times where a defense attorney will stand idly by and not challenge the admissibility of fingerprint evidence, of evidence in shaken baby syndrome cases, stuff like that. That becomes very important if you want to completely and fully utilize the judge's role as a gatekeeper. You have to bring the issue to his or her attention to begin with.
I agree with a lot of what Collin said. I think my problem with it is that, true, the judge does have to be he's the one who decides if evidence meets the standards of admissibility. I guess my beef is the standards of admissibility. Nowadays, the current status is that, for a long time, since the 80s, 90s, a lot of this forensic evidence has just been seen as if they say that's what it is, it's what it is. And I think that the standards of that evidence getting in are so low, really, to my opinion, that we just take it for what it is and we say, oh yeah, this is DNA evidence, and this is fingerprint evidence, this is 100% accurate, and this is what it is. But really, I think the last 5 or 10 years or so, I think people are starting to question in the community, probably mostly defense attorneys, are questioning, is this evidence actually reliable? Because there's so many parts in these processes with all the different ways the forensic evidence is calculated that there could be human errors along the way. So I think my beef would be, I guess, the standards of admission. But he's right, though. The judge does decide, does it meet our current standards? But I would argue our current standards need to be overhauled.
A great example of that is recently in Texas. I want to say the and I could be wrong, but the Texas equivalent of what we have, the OSBI, the Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation, they recently decided to re-examine something like 15 or 20,000 DNA cases because the FBI came out with a report that said that there was a potential for error in 2 donor DNA cases. And I'm no expert on all that, but I can just tell you that it shows that the DNA evidence is not necessarily 100% foolproof because, like Ashley said, it is subjected to human error.
Yeah, I actually, I've been going on Thursdays. OSBI has been doing a program for defense attorneys and DAs and judges to come in, and we've been actually spending some hours in the lab and actually having lecture and this and that front and learning more about how fingerprint analysis and DNA and these things happen. And we spoke about that last Thursday, actually, about the FBI basically came out and they're like, hey, we got it wrong. There's a couple of things in our coding system. Because basically, whenever with DNA, they go and they run certain numbers, but there are certain numbers that are set in this FBI CODIS system. And so whenever they're doing a mathematical analysis, they use those numbers in that FBI system. Well, the FBI system came out and said, hey, we got some of this wrong a little bit. So it kind of changes the numbers in your analysis. So that's what Texas is going through. So they didn't keep up with there were some other changes in the protocols. Texas didn't keep up with it. So now this other change came about and it just really messed up their files.
That's alarming.
Isn't it?
Wow.
I think they found at least one person that was wrongfully convicted, and that I think that, correct me if I'm wrong, Ashley, but I think that's what started this whole review of those cases.
I think so, and I just tell you, it just scares me so much. As a citizen and a human and as a defense attorney, that's extremely troublesome to me.
Right.
A lot of people think that as defense attorneys, we represent only guilty people, and that's not true. I can tell you that in my relatively short career, I've had at least a handful, if not more, clients that were innocent of the charges of which they were accused, and I believe that's every time I see that keeps me going to making sure that everybody's rights are fully exercised, and to try to be the stopgap between what the state is saying and what actually happened.
Huh. Why, and shifting gears a little bit, Ashley, why did you choose to be a defense attorney?
Interesting question. I just feel like my heart, honestly, is really just connected to this work. I love what I enjoy. I enjoy, for example, like search and seizure law, the Fourth Amendment, the Fifth Amendment, Sixth Amendment, all of them. I really enjoy investigating how those constitutional, and the case law actually applies to the facts of my cases. At the end of the day, I really see my job as a defense attorney mostly to make sure to do the best I can to make sure that the government got it right, that they got the right person, that they followed the proper procedures, that the cops did what they were supposed to, that the cops collected the evidence properly, they preserved the evidence properly. The state actually had to try to prove their case. The judge did his job, the jurors did their job. That's kind of, I see myself as basically, I'm trying to enforce these bounds and norms that society that we have agreed upon that we should operate within. And it's kind of my job to make sure that all those players in that system do their job, because really I'm the only one, the defense attorney is the main one actually that tries to keep everyone in check. And we don't get it all the time, and it's really hard. It's an upward battle actually, because we're trying to force all these government players that are also all human and have different motives and biases too. Sometimes a DA might really believe in their case and really think that's what it is. Just like as a defense attorney, sometimes I have a client like, I really believe what they're saying. Like, no, like they were, this is self-defense or something, So it's just like you got people that really believe in their causes and they're going and fighting out in the courtroom. And I don't know. Sometimes it's a mess.
Yeah. As we wrap up this segment, before moving on, choosing the right criminal defense attorney, Collin, why did you choose to be a criminal defense attorney?
Well, when I was younger, I used to watch the show The Practice with my parents, and that's what got me interested in criminal defense. And then really what sealed the deal was interning at the Oklahoma County Public Defender's Office and seeing how much good they really do and how many people they actually help. And I would like to incorporate all the reasons that Ashley just said, and then add that a lot of times the job isn't about, are they innocent or what happened? It's sometimes it's just about making sure that the punishment fits the crime.
I see. Well, folks, you're listening to Oklahoma Voice. I am with Ashley Forrester and Collin Rockett. They are defense attorneys here in Oklahoma City. And before we move into our next segment, I want to remind our audience how you can tune into Oklahoma Voice. We are live Monday through Friday at 7 p.m., and there are several ways to tune in. First, you can join us over the air at AM 1220. Second, you can listen in by internet through your computer, smartphone, or tablet by live streaming at ktlv.com. Simply go to ktlv.com and click on the live streaming audio button. Third, you can hear our program on TuneIn Radio through the TuneIn Radio app. Simply download the app from your app store on your smartphone or tablet, and once downloaded, enter KTLV into the selection bar. And lastly, you can catch any of our shows that you might have missed on my YouTube channel. Go to youtube.com and enter Oklahoma Voice with Jonathan Clour into the selection bar. Choosing the right criminal defense attorney. I know that there are several different questions you should ask yourself when you are trying to choose a right attorney to defend you if you have charges that are being filed against you. Collin, you have an excellent blog on your website, and I believe your website is www.rockettlaw.okc.com. And that's ROCKETT, lawokc.com. And and by the way, Collin, you have a really good commercial on there too.
Oh, thank you.
He does. I love it.
Yeah, and hey, and that's a pretty good looking lady you got on there too.
She was grateful enough to help out with that. She's actually a friend of a friend, and that was her first time to ever do anything like that. And I thought she did it very well. We shot that in under 4 hours, and it was we had a great time doing it.
Wow, I mean, it is a very, very good quality, well put together commercial, and I mean, she really carried herself nicely. I mean, I would have no idea that this was her very first time to do that. And I was looking at, and Collin, I don't know if you've seen it or not, but somehow I was just browsing YouTube one day, and there is this, perhaps he's a defense attorney, I'm wanting to say in Texas, and he decided to create a series of comical ads for his law firm. And I mean, it has a little bit of comic relief to it. And it's got him playing, I think, like different characters, like coming to the rescue. I'm going to have to maybe play some of that. If I get a hold of this, I'm going to play some of that on the air because it is a very, very funny commercial. But my point is, it gets people's attention when you do something different instead of, just the plain vanilla, plain Jane, attorney commercials that you see. Well, jazz it up a little bit. Mm-hmm. And you jazzed it up, Collin.
Well, thank you very much. The goal with that commercial that you can find on my website is it was to kind of break the mold and add a little bit of comic relief to I mean, when people come to me, it's not a happy time.
Right.
They're not coming to me because, hey, everything's well and good in my life. But it does help some people to, it does grab attention when there is a little comic relief involved in what's usually not a great situation.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Well, okay, so choosing the right criminal defense attorney, we reviewed your blog, Ashley and I, and, we found a lot of really good points to discuss this evening, and, your first point that you have up there is how many attorneys should you consult? So how many should you consult, Collin?
There are different schools of thought on this. I believe that if you consult with 3, you'll get a good idea of, like, if it were me in the situation that my clients are facing, I would consult with 3.
3.
This gives you, it's all about being comfortable. You want to be comfortable because what's on the line is not always just money. It's freedom. It's, your future employment, your ability to obtain employment, your ability to operate a motor vehicle. Just, you need to be comfortable with the person that you choose.
Huh.
And so I think you can get a pretty good idea of the person that you would be most comfortable with if you consult with 3.
Okay, so you should consult with multiple attorneys if you have the chance.
That would be my recommendation. Okay. Yeah.
How about you, Ashley? What do you think?
I'd say, yeah, it's probably a good idea to shop around a little bit. But I kind of feel like if you are in the process of that and you end up finding one you like and you just, you really feel like you're like, this is the one, that's a personal fit. I'd say go ahead and go for it because it is kind of a personal relationship. And once you find that one, if it clicks.
It's a gut feeling. It's I liken it to when I went looking for colleges, and I'm an OU grad, undergraduate in law school, and
Boomer Sooner.
Boomer Sooner,
yes,
all the way. I know Ashley may not agree, but
no, I OSU all the way.
OSU? Oh, come on. Oh.
I'm a Boomer girl. I've actually never been to an OSU game before.
Good
there
deal,
you go.
Good deal. But we can be friends still, Ashley.
Okay.
But I liken it to when I was looking for a college, I was always told it's where you fit in, it's where you're comfortable, you just get a feeling. And that's what you should be looking for. It's a gut feeling with, I'm comfortable with this person, I believe this person will do a good job, this person is ready to fight for me and is ready to fight for the outcome I'm looking for.
It's a personal relationship, and you're going to be working closely with this person, so it's important
and
that you like them.
Oftentimes for quite a while.
Yes.
A lot of times, if you're not in the law community, it's hard to tell who has a good reputation or, an attorney's past. How can you do your research on an attorney? Or is there a way without being in the inner circle? You guys see what I'm getting at?
Yeah.
I do.
I don't know.
I think
I guess befriend a lawyer in the community and then ask them.
Well, word of mouth works pretty well too. I think if you say, if I picked up criminal charges and I wasn't an attorney, I'd probably ask around to my friends if they've had used any criminal defense attorneys, and they'd probably be like, oh yeah, this person's awesome, or don't go to this person, they're, no good. So word of mouth is pretty important. In fact, most of my clients are actually just from word of mouth or friends of friends. Most of my clientele, like 80% are probably friends of friends or client, word of mouth clients.
Okay. All right, Collin?
So what I would do is, I would do exactly what Ashley said, because that would be one way that I would do it is word of mouth, because you're going to know, unfortunately, if you haven't been in trouble in the past, you're going to know somebody that has, whether it be a DUI, whether it be possession of marijuana, or something more serious. Mm-hmm. And they'll be able to guide you as to, hey, this person did a great job, maybe go talk to them, or I talked to these people, I didn't like this one, here's why. So I think that the word of mouth is a great tool. Another good tool is the internet. There are some sites. One that I like is avvo.com. You can get on there and you can look and see that they have their own rating system, and you can look and see if the attorney's ever had any disciplinary action taken against them by the bar. You can look and see their background, cases they've won, or outcomes, what their practice area, it gives you a pie chart of what their practice areas consist of. And I think that that's a good tool. Another tool is, and I am drawing a blank, it's, you know what, why don't we come back to that if I think
Okay. Well, Ashley, do you have anything to add again to that really quick?
No, I think we covered it.
Okay, perfect. Because we have, I think, about 3 minutes left for the show. And so, just really quickly, maybe in a little over a minute, I saw on your blog, Collin, that you made a very good point when you are looking at pricing for an attorney. You put a couple quotes up here that really gets people thinking. A person when shopping for an attorney might say, well, this attorney that I talked to quoted me much more than any other attorney that I visited with, so they must be better than the others. Or on the flip side, this attorney quoted me much less than any other attorney that I've talked to, so I must be getting a better deal. Is this true or is this false, Collin?
I find that, I mean, it doesn't necessarily, those are not always, there's not a yes or no, true or false answer to that. But in general, I find that those are false.
Okay.
You can find, like, as to the first quote, an attorney that's quoted you much more than any other, that doesn't necessarily mean that that attorney isn't going to work as hard for you as maybe somebody that quoted a little bit less. What you're looking for is you want somebody to quote you a price based on the amount of work, effort, time, and what's on the line. You want a quote based on that. You don't want a quote based on, you want somebody to hear the facts of your case before they give you a quote. You don't want somebody to go, DUI, I do those for,
Mm-hmm.
grand.
Mm-hmm.
You want somebody that says, well, what happened during the stop? What did you do the breath test? Did you not? Did you do the field sobriety test? Did you not? You want somebody that's going to quote you a price after you speak with them about the facts of your case. So while that could be true that the person that quoted you more than anybody else
Mm-hmm.
is going to work harder than anybody else, it also can be false many times.
I agree with Collin. Whenever somebody asks me to give them a quote or a price, I always ask a few things like, okay, well, what are the charges? What county is it in? What are your priors? Because that can affect the difficulty of the case. And then facts like search and seizure issues. Okay, do I have to do research and write motions to suppress? Things like that. So it shouldn't just be a blanket thing. And also I want to add, if an attorney ever makes you a promise, run.
Mm-hmm.
Attorneys should not be making promises. I had a client the other day wanting to know if I could promise him something. I'm just like, I will never promise you anything. I shouldn't be making promises. I can promise you to do my best, but an attorney who makes you a promise, they probably might not necessarily be telling you the truth on other things. So be wary of that.
Yeah.
Beware of the promising attorney.
And I believe we have less than a minute left on air. Really quickly, Ashley, can you give us the name of your law firm and some contact information?
Absolutely.
Just in a couple seconds.
Forrester Law Firm. My phone number is 405-974-1625. Forrester Law Firm at yahoo.com is a good email for me. And my firm's in Midtown, 625 Northwest 13th Street, 73103.
All right, Collin, I see on your website that you offer free case evaluation. Can you give us your contact information in just a couple seconds?
Sure. My law firm's the Rockett Law Office. My number is 405-529-6005. My website is www.rocketlawokc.com. And you can find me on Facebook, on Twitter at Collin Rockett. And obviously you can get a free case evaluation if you go to my website.
That sounds great. Folks, Ashley Forrester and Collin Rockett, attorneys at law, I'm going to thank them so much for joining us and giving us our legal analysis. Everyone, I am Jonathan Clour. Thank you for listening to Oklahoma Voice. Good night. Yeah, really close. Because, literally the generator is going to shut off in less than a minute.
I was worried you weren't going to have enough to talk about.
Oh, no. Oh, gosh. People. That's why everybody always worries about. But, once this thing gets rolling, it flies by quick.
I didn't worry about it. I was actually really prepared. This one I was like, I don't know.